As you know, conservative voices are an endangered species right now in public discourse, certainly in the realm of social media. Conservatives are canceled, they're silenced, they're deleted, they're shadow banned. Is there a way to fight back? How do conservatives fight back and still maintain their free market principles? Well, let's talk to a smart guy about it. Dr. Kevin Roberts is actually the head of the Heritage Foundation, and you talk about conservative principles, Dr. Roberts. You guys are supposed to be the be-all and end-all of that. So thank you for coming down off the lofty mountain and talking to us here.
It's a pleasure to be with you. We need to spend as little time on the lofty mountain as we can.
I joke, but that is sort of the old sort of perception of Heritage Foundation. But famously, you're making headlines by actually sort of saying this isn't your grandpa's heritage.
Yeah, people have said I've been on post 10 months. Gosh, this outsider from D.C. really is an outsider. Yeah, he wears boots as I am now. Don't like the swamp. I don't exist to go to cocktail parties, and frankly, no one at Heritage does. We're really focused on taking back the country. I'm just making it more explicit.
Well, I'll tell you, 10 years ago when I first came to D.C., I went to a lot of Heritage events, and if I said, hey, what do we get, what's our position on big tech? They'd say, oh, what, you mean like word processors versus typewriters? I mean, I don't mean to make too light of it, but they weren't really plugged in on where these wars are right now, and they are. This is an information war on the internet and social media, and the cancellation of conservative voices has become a real problem. How do you guys fit in there?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think the entire political right, or most of the political right, including very conservative institutions like Heritage, were slow to respond to the threat. And it wasn't that, say, at Heritage or another public policy group I led in Texas were misguided about it. It's that it's very hard to reconcile our belief in the free market, which is good, right? With an understanding that there's something even bigger than that, as important as the free market is, and that is the common good. That is that these high-tech companies are destroying the way we go about our lives. And so to cut to the chase, Larry, what Heritage has not only done, but what we've led on, including in the most recent action that the U.S. House took, is beginning to hold the tech companies accountable. Those bills, the one bill that was passed, are but a down payment on what needs to happen, but ultimately a rather famous Heritage paper that was published right after I started says that what we have to do is hold these CEOs accountable. We've got to publish their algorithms. We've got to, for the American people, reclaim our right to privacy, freedom of speech, and make sure that they stop undermining the common good.
All right, so now what I love about this program and the conversations we're able to have is that we can sort of dive deep on this and really find out, okay, yeah, that sounds right, but does it fit into traditional conservative principles? I'm a Reagan conservative. I was
Likewise.
a kid, right? We're about the same age, and we were inspired by the Reagan presidency. Okay, the three-legged stool, right? We had our strong national security and defeat the communists. We had our Judeo-Christian principles and morals, right? And then we had our small government, almost libertarian-minded, stick with the Constitution and keep the government out of these things. So how do you respond to the argument is, listen, Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, they made the sandbox. They're allowed to make the rules of who gets to play in their sandbox. Where's the government's role as a conservative to tell them what they can do with what they created?
Great question. In fact, that is the question. And I'm grateful for the three-legged stool, as I've become enamored with saying we probably need to add some legs to that stool. in part because, and no offense really to libertarian friends, for about 15 years or so, that leg of the stool, the free market leg, the libertarian leg, had actually become not a leg of a stool, but an altar, where conservative policymakers would bow at the altar of the free market saying, that's the end-all be-all. It's not the end-all be-all. The free market, as you know so well, Larry, is the creation of a healthy society, healthy families, a government that is, in fact, present but as limited as possible. And so it's a fair question for someone to say, how can the Heritage Foundation, the largest truly conservative institution on the right in America, say that we can regulate the free market? Because the free market is being used by these companies against us. But in reality, as sort of a nod to my libertarian friends, it isn't much of a free market anyway. These companies have gotten favoritism. They have advantages as a result of the government. We believe that using antitrust laws, which can be used sparingly for the sake of putting into balance the common good in the free market, is the way forward. And the last thing I would say is, Heritage is unique on the right among organizations that are headquartered in D.C. because we're not supported by a few people who live in the swamp. we're supported by several 100,000 Americans. So we are the institution of small donors. We're the institution of people who know what time it is in America, and they know that the time that it is in America is to put these companies back in a box.
All right, so I get it, I do, and my instinct is to lean toward the government isn't the solution. The government's going to mess it up when you turn
It's ours too.
Right, and certainly when Twitter is censoring you or Facebook is deleting you, that's not a violation of the First Amendment because it's not the government doing it, it's a private company. But here's the real sinister thing. Now we've learned it, and I think this is why I'm leaning your way here on this. The government is involved. We know that the FBI reached out to Mark Zuckerberg and said, hey, we've got some Russian disinformation coming, and the next thing you know, no one gets to learn about the Hunter Biden laptop story. We know that the White House was interfacing with Instagram and with Facebook, saying, oh, there's a lot of people saying stuff about the vaccine. Turns out those things about the vaccine were true, but they had them delete those accounts. So the government is actually right there using these platforms and applying pressure on these platforms to censor these voices.
It's the worst combination, or one of the worst combinations I can think of, Larry, and that is big government with big business. It's not an anti-business comment. In fact, it's a pro-business comment, because there are a lot of small and medium-sized businesses who are victimized by that cabal.
Thank you. You know, Republicans are pro-business or pro-big business, and maybe we did fall into that trap, but no. We're pro all size businesses. Big businesses love monopolies. Big businesses love getting involved with the government because it kills the little guy.
Google in particular, I think, is the worst offender when it comes to that. And we believe, if you look at this heritage policy paper we issued a few months ago, that Google absolutely falls under the antitrust law. And the fact that the Congress has not moved on that already suggests how good Google and the big tech companies have been at lobbying against Americans' interests.
Oh man, Heritage Foundation and Daily Signals, your search results are just dropping as we speak.
Look, that happens every day, so bring it on.
But I joke about it, but these are the weapons they can use, and we live in a information-heavy society here, and people are looking for. This is why it's so important to our democratic process, is that people want information about issues so that they can be an informed voter, and they should be more informed than they've ever been with all the information at their fingertips. But these guys control how you get the information and even what information you can have.
No, that's right. I mean, you and I as conservative guys are 22 times more likely to have our information on social media censored than someone left of center. If you and I were members of Congress, Larry, we would be 91 times more likely to be censored. And we have a really good report last week that shows that members of Congress who are fundraising for this election season are not getting through the filters that Google have put in place. This is un-American. It's not free speech, and we have to fix it for the sake of this country.
Another thing I like what you guys have done in terms of, you're getting very good at communicating these ideas. You're utilizing the Daily Signal, the various different platforms to be able to get the message to people so they can hear it. And it makes sense. It's not just hey, we're a white paper about that, read it. When a politician's voice, when they're running for office and they are censored, or it's hard for them to get their voice out there on social media or Google or whatever, it's not just a violation of that person or that politician's right to be heard or right to speak. It's those of us who want to hear them. Our rights are being violated because we're proactively saying, hey, what did this person say? And we don't get the information. I have a right to get that. I'm a voter, I'm a citizen. And so when you start hitting those dominoes, you're talking about tens of millions of people whose rights are violated by these companies.
No, that's exactly right. What I think most Americans would say is one of the beautiful things about this country is that our laws, our government exists to ensure a neutral public square, a neutral public domain. That hasn't been the case for 10 years or more. We know that as very active conservatives. We're not saying that we want to use government action to ensure that the public domain is conservative. It's just like a classroom. When I was a professor teaching U.S. history, I didn't grade people according to whether they were conservative or liberal, but that in essence is what's happening with the collusion of big government and big business. It's past time for us to fix it.
Well, I don't know how this happened, but this room got a whole lot smarter. Frankly, the show just got a whole lot smarter, and I promise you it's not going to happen all the time. But thank you to Dr. Kevin Roberts, Heritage Foundation. We're going to continue having conversations with Dr. Roberts in the weeks ahead because there's a whole lot facing the conservative movement right now, and we want to be the place where it's discussed and maybe even moved forward. In the meantime, more to come. Keep it here. It's O'Connor Tonight, Salem News Channel.